Hello, welcome to Blackhat USA 2023. We'll be presenting our talk titled From Board to More, Upgrading Your Security with TruffleHog's Terminal UI. My name is Hong Kwok, and I'm a Senior Product Engineer at Truffle Security.
And I'm Micah, a backend product engineer also at Truffle Security.
So, what is TruffleHog? You might have already heard of TruffleHog as it's been around since 2017. In short, TruffleHog is an open source secret scanning engine. So, if TruffleHog's been around for about 6 years, why are we presenting at Blackhat? Well, there has been a ton of development on TruffleHog, and we're here to share some of the new features, most specifically our terminal user interface.
But before we get into that, here's some more background on TruffleHog to give you some context. Back in 2016, there was a growing number of data breaches. MySpace, LinkedIn, Yahoo, Equifax, and there was a real need to sift through data to find credentials. TruffleHog was created to do just that, digging through Git repositories to find any secrets it could. It was immediately useful to many security people and found tons of secrets, one of the most notable ones being an AES key in the DJI breach. So it was great, but it had some downsides too. It only scanned Git repos using a small number of regular expressions, and regular expressions being a somewhat expensive operation would slow down the tool the more we added. There was also a ton of false positives from entropy detection, making users sift through another mountain of data. All this to say, there were lots of opportunities for improvement, so we invested in working with the community to make TruffleHog even better. Fast forward to today, the latest version of TruffleHog is written in Go for speed and stability. It scans more than just Git repositories too. We're scanning S3 buckets, Docker images, Circle CI, just to name a few. It has key verification to eliminate false positives, which is enabled by default on all 700 detectors, and it supports scanning more than just plain text as well. TruffleHog now scans binaries, archives, and is decoding base64 strings too. We're adding more and more features to make TruffleHog the best secret scanning tool there is, and that includes the topic of this talk, a TUI. So, what's a TUI?
A TUI is an abbreviation for Terminal User Interface. But let's start with examining CLIs, GUIs, and TUIs to better understand how people interact with computers. CLIs. CLI stands for Command Line Interface. It's an interface that lets people interact with devices through text-based interactions. Some CLI tools include ImageMagick for image manipulation, Git for source control, and TruffleHog for secret scanning. Command lines are probably the most powerful part of computing as it has all the bells and whistles for interaction. You can basically do whatever you want with a machine, and it's available on almost any device. But CLIs also have a perceived steep learning curve. And because of that, GUIs were introduced to the world. A GUI is a graphical user interface. GUIs allow people to interact with devices through graphical representation, such as buttons and text boxes. Here, we have the GUI counterparts to the CLI tools shown earlier: Photoshop for image manipulation, SourceTree for Git, and TruffleHog Web for TruffleHog. But GUIs aren't quite as powerful and customizable as a CLI, as GUIs only really give you computing abstractions and not the full control over anything and everything over your machine. In between a CLI and a GUI, TUIs are the middle ground. As we stated earlier, TUIs are terminal user interfaces. They let people interact with devices on the terminal with ASCII-based graphical interactions. Introducing TruffleHog TUI. This was a hackathon project for the both of us. At Truffle, Micah works primarily on the back end, and I mostly do front end. At a recent offsite, we watched non-engineers interact with TruffleHog on the terminal. We decided that a TruffleHog TUI is something worth investigating in order to bridge the gap between the CLI and the GUI.
Our plan was to figure out how to make TruffleHog more accessible to more users, especially the non-technical ones. We want it to be so easy a TruffleHog can do it. This is really important to us because by lowering the barrier to entry on security tooling, the easier it is to improve your security posture. Plus, we work really hard to bring cool features to TruffleHog, and we want as many people as possible to be able to use it. That's a lot easier to do in an interactive way, and is something we focused on in our implementation. Not only will it help users find new features, but it will also guide them on how to use TruffleHog effectively.
So the tech. We use tools like Google Docs, Figma, and Bubble Tea by Charm to build out our terminal user interface. Figma is a collaborative web app for interface design. We went to Figma to spec out and prototype some of the visual designs to get initial feedback internally. We had a few iterations before we decided that it was time for development. We also used Bubble Tea by Charm CLI to build out the actual terminal user interface. Bubble Tea is a Go framework based on the Elm architecture to build terminal applications. Bubble Tea has a lovely ecosystem built around it to support building TUIs. More specifically, we use Lipgloss, a styling library, and Bubbles, a library of common UI components. Charm has some cool TUIs as well, like SoftServe, a self-hostable Git server. And in their README, there's also a list of examples by other individuals and organizations using Bubble Tea to build terminal apps. Definitely check them out if you're interested in TUIs. Okay, let's do the demo. All right, so this is the TruffleHog command line interface now. When you run just TruffleHog, it prints out the help page. When you run TruffleHog with the right arguments and flags, it'll scan something. So scanning Git, our test keys repo, and only showing the verified secrets. Cool. So onwards to our new TUI. We still preserve the use case for those that are familiar with the tool. So if you run it, pretend that says TruffleHog with the right arguments and flags, it still does the same exact thing. But now when you run it with just the command itself, instead of printing help, it asks you what you might want to do. So you can still view the help docs. You can also view the open source project. You can ask about TruffleHog Enterprise, but most importantly, you can scan a source using our wizard. So let's use the wizard since that's what TruffleHog TUI is all about. It starts you off with a list of the sources. This highlights all the available sources we can handle. You have things like file system, syslog. There's some of our enterprise offerings, but let's go with our newest source, and that is Docker. We select Docker, and here it provides a wizard to configure TruffleHog to scan Docker. You input the required fields for the source. In this case, it is the Docker image. So we're going to do our secrets image. From there, we're going to hit next, and now we can view configuring our TruffleHog configuration. So this is things like JSON output, number of concurrent workers, etc. For demo's sake, we're just going to run it with the defaults. And on our last page, we are provided an overview for the configuration as well as the generated command in case if you want to save it to run this again. Hit enter, and you just scanned a source with TruffleHog. Beautiful.
And that's it. We'll be around for any questions and feedback if you have any. If you're not here in person, you can find our community Slack on our GitHub open source page. And thank you for Blackhat for hosting our presentation and demo.